For the week of February 13th, 2014, this is the Energy Gang from Greentech Media. Hello to all. Stephen Lacey here, Senior Editor at Greentech Media. In the snow-covered, shut-down, state of emergency Washington, D.C. No shutdown here, though. It is business as usual for the podcast. And that means my co-hosts are here with me, usually in D.C., but now hunkered down in her home in Virginia is Catherine Hamilton of 38 North Solutions, a clean energy public policy consulting firm. Catherine, how are you? Are you next to a fire with a warm sweater and a cup of tea?
Yeah, right. Well, I found to my horror that none of my kids' snow gear still fits because we haven't had a big snow like this in a while. So they're all wearing like my old galoshes outside.
You did manage to get them outside while you were recording the show then?
Oh, no, they're back. They've just been secured.
In San Francisco this week, trying to get back to New York, fresh off a press call on the consequences of SolarWorld's trade complaint against China, is our good friend Jigar Shah. He's founder of SunEdison and author of the book Creating Climate Wealth. Jigar, how goes it in San Francisco?
Well, the weather's amazing, so we've got that to show for it.
Do you have galoshes that fit?
I'm going to need them when I get back to New York.
Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that we'll be doing another live show here in D.C. coming up at the Building Energy Summit on April 1st. We're going to be capping off that conference by talking about some big innovations in building efficiency, a topic near and dear to my heart. You can find out more at 2014.buildingenergysummit.com, and I hope that folks can join us. So our next guest this week was supposed to be here in D.C. as well, but all flights are grounded with a foot of snow on the ground. She was nice enough to join us by phone from Denver, Colorado. It is Dr. Cheryl Martin, the acting director of the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, known as ARPA-E. Cheryl, thanks for joining us. How are things out west?
Well, it sounds like a lot more calm than in D.C., but I'm really looking forward to getting back tomorrow.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today. We talk a lot about deployment on this podcast, but Cheryl is here to talk about early-stage innovation. ARPA-E was funded in 2009 to help support early-stage, potentially groundbreaking energy technologies. And in our first segment, we're going to look at the state of energy innovation in America. Then in part two of the show, we'll discuss themes coming out of this week's NARUC meeting in D.C. Energy commissioners have flocked to the city, and now they're stuck in the city, to talk about all things energy and utility related. And we have a roundup of the conversations on distributed generation, climate resiliency, and microgrids. In part three, we will examine the effectiveness of the solar industry's latest strategy to hit back against changes to solar promotion policies, and we'll round out the show by telling you something you may not know. Okay, first up, is ARPA-E going to do for energy what DARPA did to create the internet? ARPA-E was set up in 2007 and funded in 2009 to support work on transformative energy technologies and help them get ready for early commercialization. We now have 5 years of experience at the agency. That's not much time when you consider how long it takes for technologies in the lab to be proven, but it does give us enough to judge how things are going. Cheryl, for those who don't know much about how ARPA-E operates, why don't you tell us a little bit about how the agency was modeled and why you were brought on to lead it?
Oh, absolutely. So the agency, as you said, 5 years old, so very young, I think, in terms of both deployment of energy technologies, but also compared to DARPA, the agency upon which we were modeled. I think DARPA is probably in its mid-50s at this point, so has certainly had time to develop some amazing technologies that impact everyday life. And that was the model that ARPA-E was built on. We have some special authorities. We can bring in people from industry, academia, and national labs for 3-year terms. So our program directors come in just like at DARPA. They come in with an idea. They pitch that idea to the community at ARPA-E after doing a lot of work, engaging folks outside, workshops, really trying, I think, the best way to think about it is reframing questions so that what we're looking for is bringing people to the table who have new answers, transformative ideas, things that could be significantly better than even the forward visioning of what we have today. And I think a key piece of that success, right, we can envision a lot of things in the future, and we certainly have the intellectual and technical firepower here in the U.S. to make technology happen. But the interesting part is ARPA-E's mission is the development and the deployment of early-stage energy technologies. And that's why I came from 20 years in the chemical industry and a bit of time in venture to the agency 2.5 years ago, was the whole idea of the saying, if it works, will it matter? And looking at, well, how do you engage the appropriate next stage partners on very early stage ideas that sometimes people say, that isn't going to work, that's crazy. And so every one of our projects has actually a plan. We meet them where they are. If they're an academic who's never thought about taking something to impact in the world, if they're a startup or even a larger company, we work with them and map out what happens at the end of ARPA-E funding. Right? ARPA-E funds things 3 years, $3 million nominally, I think is a good way to think about it. And we spend a lot of time of what happens at month 37. How are you going to have the knowledge in the network? How are you going to have the right testing to get you to the next step?
Cheryl, on that point specifically, DARPA has had a lot of success because not only do they provide money, they actually are the first customer for a lot of these technologies with the Department of Defense. It doesn't sound like ARPA-E has the same mandate, but at the same time, the administration has pushed really hard for energy efficiency and renewable energy to be implemented by the government. So how does ARPA-E sort of become the first customer for some of these technologies, or allow the government to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a number of ways. Certainly, I can point most specifically to it on the defense side, where things like islanded bases, right? They're inherently islanded. Ships are inherently islanded based on how they operate, forward operating bases. We see a lot of engagement with Marines, with Navy, with Army on exactly those questions where they need things, everything from high efficiency HVAC systems for forward operating bases. We've got a relationship with Navy developing some of those to the next level to get down the path to procurement looking out in the future. We have others where they've recognized getting more out of the batteries and the storage they do have, more power in potentially constrained places is key. And so your battery management system, like how the battery actually works. We're working on next generation technology. They're running a parallel program now, starting programs with this generation, working very, very closely with our program directors so that as technology happens, it could be on-ramped essentially into future, again, procurement, because that's how it would work there. We also have a number of opportunities, folks like Primus Power, who's a sub on a Raytheon contract through Miramar Base for a microgrid demonstration. So all of those things are very, very specific examples of where things could go.
So Cheryl, one thing that strikes me is that your model is kind of turns what would be a traditional model in the DOE research programs, which is we're going to research something and then we're going to figure out where it works. And your model is here's a problem that needs a solution. What's the innovative solution? And I know when ARPA-E was started, there was a wee bit of ARPA-E envy from the other, parts of DOE. Well, gosh, those guys are like the favorites. They get all the good stuff. But my sense is that what you do also is able to connect really well with the other shops within DOE to kind of be a little more cross-cutting. Is that not the case now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure, Catherine, alluding to your kids, right? I'm sure they've never said that one was the favorite over the other, huh?
Right.
No, I think it's, when ARPA-E was new, you had to stand up a new agency, and that's got its challenges. And those who were here in that very beginning time with very few people, lots of work, were working to get that stood up. I think as we've had time to actually run projects and we've had time to have the conversations about what next, and certainly Secretary Moniz has been a big proponent of this across DOE. How do you make sure that things that we're working on are familiar to and understood by other parts of the agency so that where it makes sense that follow-on could happen? You think about, we've run carbon capture, really cool projects, right? Using jet engine design nozzles to actually spin out CO2. Well, you can't go from ARPA-E to deployment. So, just recently in a competitive solicitation, 3 of our projects were picked up for next stage deployment, through fossil, through metal. And so those are the types of things we're seeing happen. I think there's great conversation across DOE on grid and what's necessary in grid from both integration of renewables, resiliency, all of those questions. And we play a big role in that along with the other parts of the agency. And I think it's been great. And I think the fact that we reach so far out to the end customer and try to identify how would it need to be, what do they need to see so that they could adopt it, has helped us engage the rest of DOE in saying, why is it essential that we do this stage of testing with you?
Yeah, and I think in some ways you are, because of the way you look at issues and the questions you ask and the way you've diversified the portfolio of your investments, it's inoculated you somewhat from politics. So, having President Bush signed into law the Competes Act that started ARPA-E, having President Obama funded originally in the stimulus package. And it seems that while there have been a few ups and downs just because of the budget issues, you all have never really become a lightning rod. People on both sides of the aisle really think ARPA-E is important. And I think part of that is the way you describe the way your program runs.
No, we've had tremendous bipartisan support from the very, very inception. And still, benefit from that today. And I think to your point, the way we run, the idea of the agency that we're going to push the envelope, we're going to ask these questions, and we're going to engage anybody and everybody out there who may be able to move these things ultimately to the market early on, right? So even if they don't believe it's possible, and we've had people come to some of our kickoff meetings who said, we don't believe this. We don't believe you can do this. And they come back a year or 2 later to the summit, and they've come up and said, it really does work. And I think the idea that we do that and we engage people, right? Relationships take time, right? Nobody moves something forward with someone they don't know, they don't understand, they haven't seen it compared to other things. And I think the fact that we very, very consciously engage the broad energy sector and people who may be choosing to play in that sector in the future in our projects allows us to look at all these spaces and does keep, I think the both sides of the aisle very involved in what we're doing and very supportive.
So I want to wrap up quickly with another definition of success. And a lot of people point to DARPA, which ARPA-E is modeled after, for helping create the foundation of the internet. And since we're looking at really long time horizons to scale energy technologies and we're integrating them into a very capital-intensive set of legacy infrastructure, is it appropriate to compare successes from ARPA-E to, say, DARPA's success with the internet, which was a completely new set of infrastructure?
Yeah, I think ultimately, sure, that's a very fair comparison. The internet wasn't invented overnight either, right? We kind of, if you dig back into time, you're talking tens of years, right, of development to really get it to where we are today, right? The threads of this were in the 70s and 80s, right? So you're not talking something that just came about overnight. But yeah, do I think that based on things that are being invented now, that we could see completely different structures to our grids in the future? Could we see a whole different model for generation and transmission of energy? Absolutely. Do I think that some of the opportunities for how we use energy in our transportation, from how we manage our batteries to even what a battery looks like and what its role is in a vehicle, that would radically transform? Sure. I think that's where we need to be. I think that the time is now for energy. We've not seen as much innovation, in the past, but for many, many reasons, we need to see it in the future. And I think ARPA-E is really well positioned to give us those options. And I think that we're looking back 50 years from now. I'm hopeful that those who judge it see that same level of impact.
Well, Dr. Cheryl Martin is the director of the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. She joined us from Colorado. Thank you so much for being here, and good luck making your way back to D.C. We'll see you at the summit on the 24th.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the conversation, and good luck getting back, Jigger, as well.
Thanks.
You can find out more about the ARPA-E Summit taking place here in D.C. starting on February 24th at www.arpae.summit.com. We'll link to it on the podcast landing page.